Here are the 3 most popular Elm commands using the Elm executable. First, running Elm REPL is going to start an interactive session for running pieces of code, which is great for initial experimentation with Elm. Second, running Elm init is going to start a new Elm project and initialize its basic structure. Third, running Elm Reactor is going to start a new web server for development purposes. This is going to be very useful when running web apps, since we are going to use a browser to load web apps from the development server. The Elm REPL is perfect to start playing with Elm, since it offers an environment with command line interactivity so that we can write a little bit of code and get immediate feedback about it. REPL might sound a bit intimidating. It's just an acronym from R to read input from the user, such as Elm code. E stands for evaluating that input, P to print the result of the evaluation, which can also be an error if the code is invalid. Finally, L stands for looping. The session is ready for reading more input, evaluating it, and printing results until exiting the REPL. Let's have a demo to see Elm commands in action. The plan is to write a bit of code in the Elm REPL, just playing with some very basic stuff. Next, let's create an empty Elm project with Elm init and check the files that it creates. Finally, start the Elm development web server with Elm Reactor and access it from the browser. On the demo machine, let's run the Elm executable directly without any arguments. It returns a long message that includes the Elm version, a link to the Elm guide, then the 3 most common commands: Elm REPL, init, and reactor. It also includes the full list of Elm commands. Let's start the Elm REPL and write some very basic code. Type Elm REPL and press enter. The prompt changes and it's now ready to accept Elm code. We can experiment with some basic data types such as integer and string. Let's enter 1 and see what Elm prints back. It returns 1 and its data type is a number. Same for 10, the value and its type. How about a float number? Enter 1.5. It recognizes its data type as a float. Let's try to add up some numbers. 1 plus 2 returns the number 3. We can also mix an integer with a float. 1 plus 1.5 returns a float number. How about a string value? Let's try to input hello with single quotes, which is okay in JavaScript. It seems to wait for something. Press enter again. And here is our first Elm error, which is good news since errors are great for learning. The nice thing about Elm is that its error messages are very helpful. Here it recognizes the issue and suggests a fix. Switch to double quotes instead of single quotes, since Elm uses double quotes for strings and single quotes for individual characters. Let's use double quotes for a string. Enter hello world with double quotes. And now Elm recognizes hello world as a valid string. To add a comment on a line, use --. For example, add just an example, and we get the same output. Now that we wrote some basic Elm code and even fixed the first error, let's create an empty project. To do this, press Ctrl D to exit the Elm REPL. Then create a new folder named Elm course with mkdir elm _course, and another folder called hello inside it. Next, navigate to the hello folder with cd elm course hello. From inside the hello folder, run elm init to create a new empty Elm project. It tells us that Elm projects start with an elm.json file and it can create it now. Enter Y and we get a confirmation message. The URL has some useful documentation on creating Elm projects. Let's check what Elm init created. Run ls. Notice it created elm.json and the source folder. ls src shows that the folder is empty. To have a quick look at the file, use cat elm.json. It mentions the source folder, Elm version, and various default dependencies. Finally, let's start the Elm development web server to open the new empty project. In the terminal, run Elm Reactor and open the URL in the browser. We get this nice overview of the project. The source folder is empty as expected. We can view the content of elm.json from the browser. To stop the development web server, press Ctrl+C in the terminal. Overall, we achieved a lot in this clip. We wrote our first lines of Elm code, fixed our first Elm error, created a new Elm project, and saw its content in a browser using the Elm development web server.